Hi, my name is Paymal, and I will present our pictorial Physicalizing Loops on behalf of my co-author, Fdili Alaoui. In this work, we followed a research through design inquiry where we explored the concept of loops as a design material. Using an ethnographic design methodology, we aim to create artifacts that represent the ways in which content can be repeated, distorted, and modified in loops. Our design process consisted of following a score by performing loops while knitting, woodworking, lino printing, and dancing. Our pictorial leverages on the generative potential of loops as design material, the performative potential of score making and embodying and physicalizing the score to craft various artifacts, and the potential of scores for sharing loops patterns across craft domains and fabrication methods. Our design process started with the practice of noticing physical representations of loops in our surroundings. We then curated a portfolio of loops occurrences in our daily life. Based on what we noticed, we created a typology of loops and a score that captures the variety of loops that we delineated. Finally, we followed the score by creating new art-based physicalizations of the loops. We selected 4 media. Knitting and lino printing are crafts that I, as first author, practice and engage with. Choreography and programming, hacking and tracking a CNC machine are crafts that Sarah practices and engages with. Our work originated from noticing loops as a constitutive component of everyday life in objects and living organisms that we interact with. We initiated a practice of deliberately noticing occurrences of loops already present in a variety of daily sites such as our apartment, office, public transportation sites, urban gardens. The singularity of the practice of noticing in comparison with observing is that it relies on deep and slow listening and attuning the body to what is perceived, which allows one to be mindful to what can be felt and sensed. Anat Singh calls the art of noticing methods that cultivate awareness of the diverse actors, whether humans or non-humans, and that engage in alternative and embodied ways of knowing. Noticing something beyond observing it implies seeing it in a way that transforms and unsettles the viewer. It causes them to pay attention differently and to be implicated in a sight differently. Concretely, our practice consisted of slowing down and opening our perceptual channels to perceive what surrounds us, whether human or non-human, with new eyes, curiosity, and sensitivity. We documented them visually and curated this portfolio of loop occurrences. Based on small-scale and large-scale loops that we noticed, we distilled a graphic typology of loops expressing a simple loop as a line that returns to its starting point, either through repetition forward or backward, determined by the direction and chronological sequence in which it is performed. For instance, the transformation from a forward to a backward loop can be done by inverting or mirroring the sequence. The typology delineates a modified loop as a loop where an error is introduced once in an accidental manner, or sustained in a way that modifies the pattern longer. Finally, our typology delineates a noisy loop as loops where a noise as a fundamental change is introduced to shift the pattern, or cumulated until it breaks the pattern in a chaotic way. We structured the 6 main categories of loops into a final score that instantiates them in time. The score offers an opportunity to share a sequence of actions across various material explorations and crafting, and to organize movement in a temporal sequence. We aim to follow such a score by performing the sequences of movements while knitting, woodworking, lino printing, and dancing. Thus, all of the artifacts produced and the dances performed are manifestations and traces of the score and the various loops that constitute it. We then choreographed ourselves to craft physical artifacts by embodying the score that we created, exploring loops as spatio-temporal patterns. I will focus in this presentation on the first and fourth case studies, knitting and dancing. The process consists of choreographing myself while knitting, following each sequence in each part of the score. The knitting gestures follow a pattern. Here's an example of one of the knitting artifacts produced. We can see in the first part small holes, where the transition from a forward to a backward loops occurred. The backward knitting was performed by turning the work over. We can see in the second part the traces of the errors. We perform them by putting the stitch on the previous one, which cancels it, creating holes. When such an error is sustained, the hole is larger. Finally, in the third part, we can see how the stitch has been modified when introducing noise and how the mesh is subdivided into 3 stitches that propagate the noise further. We ran an online dance class where we gave the score to the students and asked them to produce short performances that embodied the 3 different parts with the sequences of loops. Here's an example of one of the performances produced based on an initial movement. We can see in the first part how the dancers are performing simple walking pattern repeating forward and backward, then occasional and sustained errors, bringing the dancers on all fours. In the first part, we can see how dancers introduce noise and then the chaos that disturbs the movement in which the body is caught when repeating the same movement. This is shown with dynamic changes in rhythm, intensity, and chaotic organization in space. Our pictorial contributes with a creative and self-reflexive design process that demonstrates the value of an embodied and performative act of scoring and physicalization. We provide 3 reflections on the process of physicalizing loops. Performing a score, scoring a performance. One can see our design process as a generative score making where each new score represents the original intention but also opens new interpretations. Values of embodying materiality of crafts. Our artifacts lay a stratum of embodied states that can be made visible and tangible. They represent our own gestures, the errors, the hesitations, the poses, and the excitement. A personal process that speaks to all. Our process is a personal process, but that we share with a broader interaction design audience. The score, for example, is a way to share information and allowed us to share a structure among ourselves practitioners and across our practices. Reflecting on the creation of the physical and embodied artifacts and performances, we would like to conclude by emphasizing the great importance that we found in cultivating the experiential qualities made of surprising and ambiguous relationship to materials and craft that can be present in the making process with digital and non-digital fabrication methods, such as those that we engage with in this exploration of loops as design materials. Thank you very much for listening. Please get in touch if you're interested in our work. We also invite you to read our pictorial for more insights on the design process.